My closest friend requested that I care for her pets a few years back while she took a trip out of town. She has 2 puppies and was leaving for a week. Although I am aware that this is unacceptable, I am unsure about the breed of dog involved. They are a combination of several species and are quite tiny, but I wouldn't call myself a professional with dogs. Well, I received all the guidelines, including the times they often went for walks and when to feed them and let them out. I was glad to look after them, since I had 2 roommates and my buddy had her own modest house, so it was good to be away on my own for a little while. The very first day and night were completely problem-free. The pups are always extremely well-mannered and groomed, so it was pretty simple. However, the following night, as I prepared to go to bed after giving the pups their last walk of the day, while I went upstairs, I overheard the dog beginning to bark furiously in the kitchen. I descended to investigate. Normally, the dogs would remain in the kitchen, where their dishes were. Despite their extensive training, they nonetheless had a wall put up between the sitting room and the dining room at night for security. When I arrived down there, I noticed that the pups were running about like crazy people. I walked over and peered out the rear door, but there was nothing there. Then I understood that I had left the door unlocked. I then swiftly secured it and made an effort to quiet the dogs. They typically did not bark as much, so I reasoned that they must have witnessed a creature or something. I was able to calm them down once more when they became agitated. I returned upstairs and sat down to get some rest. I slept off for a little while before being startled to hear the pups barking once more. I walked downstairs and heard them barking and bouncing about once more. I continued to be unable to see anything as I peered outside. While I was observing the pups, I saw that they weren't always barking at the rear door, but this was especially true with the wardrobe door that was inside and nearby. This gave me a horrible feeling. But I decided to unlock the wardrobe door. Although I knew it would be deserted, I nevertheless walked up to it because I tended to open it for a moment of tranquility. Just as I was going to grasp the handle when I arrived at it, I noticed that it had begun to spin independently. I stumbled back and ran up the steps as a result. I closed the door after entering the bedroom. The dog started to act up once more as I heard someone heading down the steps. Then I started to hear people coming up from downstairs. I then pulled out my mobile and dialed 911 to contact the police. I sprinted to the opposite corner of the room to speak with them. After the police informed me that they would be there, I heard footsteps up the stairs, but I never heard anybody attempt to enter the door to the room I was in. I paid close attention. However, I heard no more sounds. I remained mute and dared not speak. I sat there for what seemed like an eternity, listening for any sounds, and I completely anticipated that whoever was there would try to enter the space. I waited there for a while, but I never got any word. Since returning downstairs would probably set the pups off once more, I realized the guy must be upstairs still. I eventually heard the arrival of the cops coming from downstairs. The dog began to whine once again as they entered the home through the rear entrance. I let the cops into my bedroom after they went upstairs by unlocking it for them. I immediately left the house as the remainder of it was being checked once they had finished inspecting the home. They said there was no one inside. Even better, I returned inside to hunt with them. However, no one was present. They didn't see anyone who was present, so I do not even know who they were, but I have no idea how they got away. Several years back, when this incident occurred, my buddy, Austin, had just recently moved to a new home that he intended to occupy only briefly for a few weeks. I was pleased to learn that it was not that far away. However, he just informed me that he was ready to go after roughly a week of being there. He claimed that the house was extremely unsettling and that strange thing frequently occurred. He advised me to simply remain in the house for myself because I did not believe it at the time. I concurred. So we decided to switch places for a few days. I was quite dubious of whatever Austin claimed to be terrified of and assumed he was merely bothered by mice or anything like that. When I arrived at his house, I noticed that it appeared to be rather ancient and in poor condition. Austin gave me a brief tour before departing. At the time, I laughed at how frightened he looked to be inside the house. I was sure that nothing would frighten me once he went. I lingered for a while, but nothing odd occurred at all. Not until late at night, as I was making my way upstairs, did I hear what sounded like a loud crash of objects coming from the basement. I went downstairs to the basement to see since it was so loud. When I arrived down there and turned on the light, I did not see anything odd. There wasn't much down there, just a few baskets that weren't on their sides. I walked back upstairs nonetheless, thinking there must be a reason, but I could not help but feel a little uneasy. At that time, it was already rather late. I then prepared for bed and was on the verge of nodding out. I noticed a clear scratching noise coming from the bedroom window. When I opened my eyes, I turned to the window. When the clawing ceased, I was blind. I moved closer to the window and took a look outdoors. I don't know who would be able to get to it from up there because it was on the second level of the house. Nothing, not even tree branches, was scratching it. I was now definitely frightened. I honestly didn't believe anything weird would occur when I arrived. But now I understand why this location so alarmed Austin. I departed right after, got in my vehicle, and traveled back to my house. Austin ultimately spent a couple of days in my house before he was capable of moving out and getting in position with another residence. I had no idea what was going on there. I was 19 when it occurred. My grandma inquired if I would like your apartment and look after her gardens while she was away because she was leaving town for a few days. She had a nice stash of plants, and she asked me because I shared her interest in plants to a great extent. I had already visited her home frequently. It was nearly 4 kilometers from my house, but in the town, it was slightly nearer. There was essentially only one bedroom, one lounge room, one restroom, and one kitchen in the little residence. I looked after all of her plants on the first day I was there. I did not do anything else for most of the day after that. But that evening, while I was getting ready to go to sleep, by chance, I glanced out the lounge window. The window in the lounge provided a clear view of the outside. On the opposite side of the window, a guy practically walked past me within a foot of my head. I glanced out the window because I was so startled by it. Regardless of who he was, he did not show up to see me at all as he continued to go toward the front of the house. He halted in front of the window approximately 10 to 15 feet from me while I observed him. He did not even turn to look at me when I crouched down. It was so dark that I could not make out anything about supply. Other than that, he was carrying a bag and wearing a hoodie. I saw him go inside his bag before using something to hit the window. At that instant, I also heard glass cracking. I was only able to think of hiding beneath the couch. I slid under the couch. I overheard the guy moving about the house and heading for the kitchen. I felt the overwhelming impulse to escape after he had been in the house for about a moment, and I realized that hiding beneath the bed was not the best option. I immediately emerged from beneath the bed and attempted to open the window. Try to refrain from making any noise as you gently and slowly open. At this moment, I could still sense the guy in the kitchen. If he chose to go in this direction, I would have about 10 seconds to react. I then began to move quickly. Finally, managed to force it open. Last, I hopped out the window and dashed outside. I ran to my car, which was parked in the driveway. I hurried inside and made the entire trip back home. I didn't tell my parents anything until after that, at which point they made the police call. I regret not calling the police sooner since the man had already left the home by the time they got there. He had committed a few thefts, but I don't think anyone ever caught him.